Hey everybody, morning. It's 7:30 I think on Sunday, and I'm Jason, and this is Jay's Project Garage. So this is my second video of the weekend. Yesterday I covered some stuff on the '69 Mustang, and I also talked about some engines that I picked up. I guess it's been a week ago now. I picked up two Ford 302s, and I was trying to figure out what they were. I wasn't 100% sure. They're roller cam engines. They've got stamped steel valve covers on them, but they're the newer style. And originally I thought, well, maybe these might be Explorer engines. But they've got rear sump oil pans on them, like from a Mustang. And they don't have GT43 or 4-bar heads on them, so they're not from an Explorer. It's like, okay, well, the plot thickens. I got to figure out what they are. So I started looking at part numbers. I found a part number on the plate that goes between the engine and transmission, and it was an E6. I looked at the part number for the distributor, and it was also an E6. And then I found the part number on the block, which is, I'll show you right now. And that is an E7 TE. Ford part numbers are super easy to figure out. Once you learn the codes, and I don't even know them all, but I can still pretty much tell. Once you learn the codes, you can tell exactly what the part is, what it's for, the revision number, and I mean everything. So let's take the block. So an E7 TE, the first digit would be the decade. So starting in the 1940s, Ford started using a letter to denote the decade. So an A would be 1940, a B would be 1950, a C 1960s, and so on. So if I have an E7 TE part number, I know that it's from the 80s. That casting design is from the 80s. Now I can take the second digit, and that's going to be the year of the decade. So an E7 would be an 87 casting number. Now the third digit would be the model. Mustangs are Z, trucks are T. Once you learn them all, you can kind of figure out what that part was originally designed for. So an E7 TE would be an 87 truck. And the fourth would be the department. I think chassis is A, B is body, and E is engine. So an E7 TE part number would be 1987 truck engine. That's what that part was originally designed for. The second section of it would be the basic part number, and I don't remember hardly any of those anymore. I've got a cheat book where I can kind of look and see. Basically, it gives you what the part is. And then the last part of the part number is the revision. So an A would be the first design, B second design, and so on. And you start getting into double digits, that's when they're deep into changing that part. Lots of revisions over the years. So if I were to just look at the part number, I would automatically assume, if I didn't know, that that was an 87 engine. But it's not. That was the original design. They actually have a date code on the block. And that'll tell you exactly when it was made. I didn't go that far with this one because I played CSI and figured it out without going that far. So if I were to assume that that was a 1987 engine, then it would have had to have come out of a Mustang, because that's the only engine that Ford offered in 1987 that had a roller cam in it, was for the Mustang. Those aren't Mustang valve covers, and they've never been off. I meant to say they aren't Fox body Mustang valve covers. The Mustang had cast aluminum valve covers. Those are stamped steel. That kind of says truck to me, but they're not the older style, they're the newer style, which is why I originally thought that they were out of an Explorer. Well, then I started thinking about it a little bit. So I go, okay, well, Ford carried that E7 part number block all the way up until 2000, I think. Kind of muddies the waters, makes you think Fords are complicated, but they really aren't if you use the date code. It just means that they use that same block casting for a long time. They use the same cylinder head castings for a long time. Ford has used a lot of parts for a long time. I've actually taken cars apart from the 80s that had C8 part number stuff in it. That's 1968. That's 20 years that they kept using that same part. So I figured out that these are early SN95 engines. 94, 95 Mustang. The last 2 years, the 5-liter was available in the Mustang. In 96, they went to the mod motor, which is 4.6. Still good engines. We'll talk about those some other time. So I know that I have two 94, 95 Mustang 5-liters. And I came to that conclusion from the valve covers, the double sump Mustang style oil pan, the fact that they were roller cam engines, just kind of told me that they were Mustang engines. Pretty cool. Not really anything special. They're roller cam 5-liters. The cylinder heads are 5.0 Tussin could probably do something with them, but me, you'd have to port the hell out of them, and even then, it just, I don't know. But everybody always wants to talk about how complicated Fords are, and they really aren't. They aren't. I mean, everybody's changed designs on stuff over the years, and they change design on stuff mid-year. I mean, GM fanboys, oh my God, Ford has 3 different 351s. How am I going to figure out what's what? GM has 4 different 350s. 4. And they share nothing in common. A distributor cap and a carburetor, maybe? Buick, Olds, Pontiac, Chevy, 4 350s. I guess if Ford had taken one 351 and called it a Lincoln, one 351 called it a Mercury, and one 351 called it a Ford, it would be less complicated. Ford engines actually share some parts in common. Water pumps, the modified and the Cleveland share distributors, and I mean there's a lot of stuff that interchanges between the two. The 351 modified is the taller deck Cleveland. And more on the 351 confusion. In 1969, Ford brought out the 351 Windsor. It was never designed to be a performance engine. 69 was the only year it was available with a 4-barrel in a car. They used it in 4 barrels in trucks later on. Ford used it in the Cobra R in the 90s. I mean, but it wasn't ever really a performance engine. It is now because of the explosion of the 5-liter Mustang and the 302. Because all those parts, a lot of the parts will interchange. So all of a sudden you had cylinder heads and you had all this stuff that you could do to these things. The Cleveland was Ford's performance engine. So there were really only ever supposed to be 2 351s. The Windsor was the pedestrian engine for trucks and passenger cars. The Cleveland was the hot motor. But for one reason or another, Ford couldn't keep up with production of the 351 Windsor. The Windsor, Ontario plant could not keep up with demand. Ford needed a stopgap. They needed an engine that they could use in trucks and passenger cars, and the Cleveland wasn't going to do it. So they took the 351 Windsor crank and they put it in the 400 block, and the 351 modified was born. The 400 doesn't have a letter designation, because there is only one 400. The 351 modified is called a 351 modified because it is a modified 400. That's why it says that on the sticker on the valve cover. Hopefully that helps clear some stuff up. I mean, if anybody watches this video, it might help. You could take a crank out of a 400 Ford and you could put it in a 351 Windsor, and that's how the 351 or the 408 Stroker was born. There is some parts interchangeability there, and it's not complicated. It honestly isn't. If you sit down and think about it, it's no different than any other make, is what I'm saying. But everybody wants to jump on that bandwagon and talk about, you know, how much better Chevys are, or how much better Mopars are, or whatever. I've been saying it for years. Engine Masters proved it. If you put the exact same parts in a 350, in a 351, and a 360, they're gonna make the exact same power. Horsepower per cubic inch is gonna be almost identical. One is not really better than the other. I've seen guys beat the hell out of small block Fords, beat the hell out of small block Chevys, beat the hell out of small block Mopars, and they keep coming back for more. They're all good engines. Everybody says Fords are more expensive to build. They aren't if you look at in the right places. If you go buy a Victor Jr. for a small block Chevy, it's going to be X number of dollars. If you buy a Victor Jr. for a small block Ford, it's going to be more. That's why you don't buy it from Edelbrock. You buy it from Ford Performance or Ford Racing, or you go buy old Ford Motorsport. It's the exact same casting from Edelbrock, and it's $100 less. Puts it at the exact same price as a small block Chevy. Cylinder heads, pistons. Well, I can buy the set of whatever kind of pistons, Wiseco's or whatever, for a small block Chevy for this amount of money, and I go buy the same piston for a Ford and it's more. Then don't buy it from Wiseco. Buy a set of forged pistons from DSS or Probe, and it's the exact same piston for the exact same money as a small block Chevy. If you open a Summit or a Jegs catalog and you go looking through there and you start looking at prices, well, the Ford's just more expensive. That's because you're not thinking outside the box. Fords might require just a little more legwork, but I can build one for almost the exact same money as a small block Chevy, and it's going to make the exact same power. So the argument goes out the window. 2-bolt main small block Chevy will handle X amount of power, RPMs, over a certain amount of time. 351 Ford, 2-bolt main, exact same. You can beat the hell out of these things, and they're going to keep coming back for more. I mean, if you knew the racing history on the Ford 302, and now the only thing that it's known for is all those things are good for is splitting the block. 9 times out of 10, that's user error from a bad tune or asking more of it than Ford ever imagined. I mean, these things were designed to make 300 horsepower, maybe 350 horsepower. It's a production engine. But everybody wants to badmouth it because it won't do what they want it to do in a racing application. It's not what it's designed for. I mean, it performed stellar in stock applications. I have never, ever had an issue with it. And if there's ever any question about the durability of a Ford 5-liter, watch 5.0 Tussin. 176,000 mile Explorer short block, and he's pegging the thing at 7,000 RPM, bouncing off the rev limiter on every shift. And he's been doing it for a while with all of his cars. They will take a beating and keep coming back. Don't count them out. And the last thing I want to cover in this video, I've seen it a million times. Why does Ford make part number so hard to find on the block? I mean, you have to crawl underneath the car and look at the block, and you have to take the cylinder head off to see the part number. Because Ford didn't put those part numbers there for you. They weren't thinking about some guy going to the junkyard trying to figure out what the engine was. All they did was put a number on it so they could identify the part. That's it. That's the only reason why there's even a part number on it. Just so it could be identified when it was sitting on a shelf. Sorry. It's not all about you, man. But I think that's it. Hopefully this helped. I'll keep making videos like this in the future, and I'll get more and more in depth. But in the meantime, get out in the shop and work on your projects. Quit complaining about things you can't control. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you next week.